And good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for stopping in. We're not over at the parsonage anymore. We're back in the church office. I got my first COVID shot yesterday, and so we're back and working away in the church office again, and we will unless something happens to change that. So here we are. We are continuing in our Lenten study on a cold and snowy afternoon. The snow's done, but we thought we were really sailing along there with temperatures in the 70s, and now reality has kicked back in and it's March again. So, but spring is on the way. It'll be here on Saturday, and we're looking forward to that. And so we're here continuing with our study on the book of Acts, and I'm here sore shoulder and all. Man, I've had thousands and thousands of shots in my life for allergies and whatnot, but this one really stings a little bit. So, but it's done. I'm happy to have a sore shoulder today, and glad that you've decided to join in on our Lenten study of the Ten Commandments. We are looking at the commandment now that says, "You shall not commit adultery." And we've gotten about halfway through on this one. And by the time we get done with this one today, you'll probably feel like you want to take a shower, because you're probably going to feel a little bit on the slimy side, because there's some things here that we need to deal with, we need to talk about, and there's no way of getting around them. So we will do that. So we are going to talk now about how Jesus redefined the whole idea of adultery. We'd spent last time talking about the Old Testament definition of it, and Jesus, well, the Jewish society, in fact, almost all of civilization back in Jesus's day, would be what you would call patriarchal. In other words, male based. Men were at the head, men called the shots. Women, in most cases, were considered property. They were, you owned your wife, you owned your daughter, etc., that type of thing. And so it was a patriarchy. Jesus, I believe, upended that whole idea, where he says in Matthew chapter 5, he expands on things, and he says, I'm trying to find my quotation marks here. He says, "You have heard it said, don't commit adultery. But I say to you that every man who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery in his heart." Now, Jesus here, now note, he includes not only the act of adultery, he includes now the thought that is behind the act. In fact, he goes a little bit further. He goes on to say, this is also in Matthew 5, and picking up at verse 29. "And if your right eye causes you to fall into sin, tear it out and throw it away. It's better that you lose a part of your body than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to fall into sin, chop it off and throw it away. It is better that you lose a part of your body than that your whole body should go into hell." So now, does Jesus literally mean, and we've talked about this before, does he literally mean that you're supposed to gouge out your eye, or you're supposed to chop off your hand? I don't think so. I think he's using a form of speech, a form of literature here known as hyperbole, which is the act of overstating something in order to get the person who's listening, to get their attention and to make a point. It's Jesus's way of saying, hey, you guys, this is serious, and I really want you to pay attention now to what I'm saying. Now, there are always, in this world, there are always going to be temptations. I find it very interesting. One of the cable networks has a series. Now, all this reality TV, which I personally do not like. I have yet to see a reality TV show that I thought that could hold my interest and that I wanted to watch. I don't get what's the big deal is about Survivor, for example. And if you're a fan, you'll have to forgive me. I just don't get it. But one of the cable networks has a reality show out now on called Temptation Island, dealing with coming to the island to date other people than the person that you are currently seeing, which just really stretches for me the borders and the boundaries of that which is moral and ethical. So, but it does make the point that there are always going to be temptations in this life. The scripture says so. There may be moments occur where you are attacked at a point of weakness. And all of us have our points of weakness. None of us is perfect. Paul talks about putting on the whole armor of God to protect us against the fiery darts of the evil one. And the devil will always tempt you at your weakest point. He knows where you're strongest, and why would he bother to attack you at your strongest point? He'll always go for the weakest spot because the devil is a dirty fighter. He's also a very, very effective one. So, there are going to be times, and there are also going to be times when you are more vulnerable than others. There are going to be times when perhaps you don't feel particularly loved or appreciated. You may not always feel in love with somebody, but you have vowed, you have made a promise and a commitment to practice love and to be loving. So, how do we square those two basic ideas of where we are and where we want to be? In 2018, the General Social Survey of the University of Chicago, which is a survey which has been taken for very, very many years, asked the question, is it wrong to have sex with someone other than your spouse? Interesting results. 76% of the people who answered said, if you are married, it is always wrong to have sex with someone other than your spouse. 15% said it's almost always wrong. Now, that 76% who said it's always wrong to have sex with anybody other than your spouse, that's down. That's down from 10% by 10%. In 1980, when the survey was first being taken, 86% of the people who were surveyed said it's always wrong to have sex with someone else who is not your spouse. Now, so most people, a vast majority of people, 3/4 of the people surveyed, agree that infidelity is wrong. But many, many people have affairs. The general survey said for people between the ages of 60 and 70, 16% of those people admitted that they had had an affair. The people in their 50s, 12% admitted that they had had an affair sometime in their life. And those who are between the ages of 20 and 40, 10% admitted that they had had an affair sometime in their life, meaning they had had a sexual relationship outside of their married, committed to their spouse relationship. Now, that actually is kind of low because there are other surveys that will go as high as 20% on that particular figure. But it seems, at least, that the younger generation is more inclined to fidelity than those of us who were children of the 60s, which kind of makes sense because if you didn't go through the 60s like many of us did who are in our late 60s and 70s, you wouldn't understand. You had to be there to appreciate it. But going back to the whole idea of fidelity versus infidelity, there are websites out there, and you're probably aware of this, that promote infidelity. Probably the most well-known is Ashley Madison, and their catchphrase, their mantra, their slogan is, life is short, have an affair. And they are set up, it's a dating site for people who want to do that. And you might think, oh, gee, that's awful. They claim to have a base, their marketing base is over 60 million people that utilize that particular website. 60 million people. Now, of course, it's a worldwide website. Now, you might say, well, there are 7 billion people in the world, so that's kind of a small percentage. Well, yes, but 60 million people is 60 million people. So, do discovered, admitted affairs usually break marriages? Usually, not always. Usually. Um, Many people who get involved in affairs are good people, good Christian people, people who love God, people who got caught in a moment of weakness or in a compromising situation or thought this could never happen to me or it happens to other people. Certainly, it's not going to happen to me. But all of a sudden, bang, there you are, and it happens. It happened to David. We have other scriptural uh, stories regarding that type of thing. So, just so we understand that it's out there, you know, it's out there. You can't deny it. So, what are you going to do? And it seems like uh, every day, it seems like something is going on in the news or society that involves all of a sudden a revelation of or an admittance of some sort of a sexual impropriety by a married individual. Governor Cuomo, for example, of New York, is having his problems right now because of alleged indiscretions along these lines. I say alleged because they have not yet been proven. But there you go. It's all around us. It's all the time. So, with that in mind, let's talk about porn and adultery, pornography. Pornography did not originate with the internet. It simply has made it more prevalent and more easily available to more people. How long has it been around? Well, you go back to Pompeii, which was destroyed by Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. I can pull that one right off the top of my head because there's that commercial right now for Google Assistant that utilizes that. But Pompeii was perfectly preserved in many ways in terms of being buried in volcanic ash. And so we know that there were loads and loads of walls of buildings and homes in Pompeii that had just a lot of sexually explicit pictures on them. And there were also a lot of brothels in Pompeii. We know this. But it is the ease of accessibility and the sheer amount of pornography that is absolutely staggering today. The largest porn site in the world right now reports 42 billion, that's billion with a B, hits a year. And now we can say there are only 7 billion people in the world. That averages about 115 million hits a day. Wow. Now, some people will say that pornography is useful, that it serves a useful purpose within society. Um, I beg to differ. Pornography studies show that porn does not give satisfaction as it claims to. It, in fact, lessens satisfaction and increases frustration. Is pornography an addiction? I've read studies both ways. And I would be inclined to say that I would agree that it probably is because casual use leads to more use, it leads to escalation. Child pornography, which just even the mention of it is disgusting, has escalated with the advent of the internet. In 2019, tech companies reported an estimated 45 million videos and photos of children in sexually explicit positions and situations, children that were being sexually abused, which was more than double the previous year, which simply goes to tell us that human trafficking, sex trafficking, is a very real thing in the world, a very real thing in this country. We can say that to you without a doubt, without fear of being someone denying it. And remember, though, before we come down, totally hard on the people who are doing this, presenting this, remember the bad guys, the drug dealers, all these types of people, the sex traffickers, are only doing this because they're making money off of it. If there wasn't money to be made on this, they would be off doing something else. In other words, there is a market for this. And as long as there is a market for something, there will be people who will illegally, will try to meet that need, for the purposes of making money. If they were not making money, if there wasn't a market for this, they would not be doing it. The same would be true for drugs. If there were not a market for it, there would not be the amount of drugs out there that are on the street. So they're responding to demand. And there is a demand for the product that they are creating. And frankly, I think this is only scratching the surface. So let's talk a few thoughts about resisting temptation here. Adam Hamilton makes these recommendations. He says, first of all, he says, remember who you are. Remember that you are a follower of Jesus Christ. Remember that you are a spouse, a parent, a grandparent, a Christian, a pastor. And I want to be known and defined as a person who loves God, who loves other people, and I want to live a life that is consistent with that. And adultery, sexual infidelity, pornography, that's inconsistent with all of that. Second, recognize that, have you recognized that there are consequences for your action? Invariably, there will be consequences. Now, you need to think about, well, what are the worst possible consequences for my actions? Will those consequences make me proud? Or will they make me ashamed? Will I be hurting somebody? If so, who will I be hurting? And do I want to do that? Third, rededicate yourself to God. Every time that you face a temptation and you realize that it is hitting you where it hurts, and you're starting to play the maybe what if game, rededicate to God. Pray in the face of your temptation, and just James chapter 4 verse 7 says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. And that's the easiest thing to do, is when you face those kinds of situations, turn to God. God, help me. I cannot help myself. Fourth, reveal your struggle to someone that you trust and someone who cares about you. Secrets have power over you, and friends can hold us accountable. I know many individuals who have accountability groups. They have prayer partners who to whom, or father confessor figures or mother confessors, people to whom they hide nothing. And when you feel like you've got to hide something, keep something from somebody, that means it's probably wrong. And last, remove yourself from the tempting situation. This is called the Joseph strategy. You remember the story of Joseph. He was sold by his brothers into slavery into Egypt. He was taken into the house of Potiphar, who was an Egyptian official. And Joseph was a handsome young man, and Potiphar's wife took a liking for him and kept propositioning him and trying to get him in a sexual situation. He resisted, but one day he had to be in the house carrying out his duties, and she not only propositioned him, she grabbed him by the robe and said, "You are going to do what I tell you, slave, or else." And in the face of that kind of temptation, Joseph did not stand there and try to reason with Potiphar's wife. He did not try to rationalize the whole situation to himself. He ran. He turned and he ran so hard and so fast, he left his robe in her hand, which she then used to falsely charge him with attacking her in attempted rape, which got him thrown into prison. So in Joseph's case, while it kept his integrity intact, it cost him something. Now, in the end, God rewarded him for his faithfulness, for his fidelity, but not right away. It cost him something, and that's the Joseph strategy. So when you're in a situation that is a temptation and it's something that you know you're looking at the possibility, you're wanting to do something that you know you shouldn't, get the heck out of there. Don't hang around. If you have to turn and physically run, run. Do it. There's no shame in that whatsoever. Do it. Know yourself. Know where you're strong. Know where you're weak. Don't be arrogant in your strength, because that'll get you into trouble too. But when all of a sudden you're attacked at your point of weakness, get out of there. You know, don't stand and look the tiger in the eye. Get out of there as quick as you can. So, now, let's get back to Jesus, though. In the Bible, New Testament, John chapter 8. That particular section of John's Gospel was not in, we believe, the earliest texts of John's Gospel. It was included, it was being circulated independently in the church up until about the 2nd century. And eventually it was included in John's Gospel, but just so that you understand the situation. And so let's read that particular situation as it appears there, beginning in John chapter 8, verse 3. Now the legal experts and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in the act of adultery. Placing her in the center of the group, they said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of committing adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone women like this. What do you say?" Okay. You know the story. It was a trap, okay? The law clearly states that the death penalty is appropriate here. Now, why are they doing this particular thing? Well, the Pharisees at this point have seen that Jesus is merciful, that he treats people with caring, and they see now that this is an authority of Scripture trap or test for Jesus, which is what we're involved in today with the whole gay issue, because conservatives keep coming back to it's a question of the authority of Scripture. And I say, no, it's a question of the interpretation of Scripture. And when we begin to understand authority and interpretation and do our hermeneutic correctly, we begin to see exactly how and where does Scripture apply to us within the modern day culture. And so they see this now as, okay, for us the authority of Scripture is absolute, and here we can trap Jesus here. And so here we go. Now, imagine the woman, the poor woman. She's terrified. Was she a willing participant in the situation? I got to believe that this was a total setup from the beginning. Some guy seduced her somehow, some way. Now you say, well, okay, if that's the case, then, she bears some blame here. Yes, she does. But it's also a setup. And you play the what if game. What if the guy who seduced her is removed from the equation? Does this whole thing happen? No, it doesn't. And notice here, it's just the woman. Where's the guy? Because if they're both married and they're committing adultery, it's adultery for both of them. Well, then they're both supposed to be stoned. But here it's just the woman. Why is that? Well, because the Jewish authorities, I think, considered the woman to be a pawn, to be expendable. They're going to use her here. And so she's got to be totally terrified. She's humiliated. She's exposed. She's vulnerable. We don't know what her story is, except that she was a pawn. the authorities considered to be totally unimportant. So, and I think the guy was part of the setup. And because notice, he's nowhere to be found. So we're told that Jesus bends over as they're making these accusations, and with his finger he begins to write in the sand. Now, what did he write? And why did he do that? Well, we don't know. We're not told. But they continue to question him here. Some people have suggested that he was writing the sins of the Pharisees and the chief priests and the scribes who were there doing this. Others might suggest that he was writing the commandments in the dust there. But he stands up and he says to them, "Whoever has not sinned among you should be the one to throw the first stone." And one by one, they drop their stones and they go away. Jesus shows mercy. Now, the Catholic Church version of this, which is a joke, by the way, is they bring the woman, they throw her down in front of him, and Jesus says, "Whoever's without sin should throw the first stone." And then Jesus has to duck as a rock goes whizzing past his head. He stands up, he looks into the crowd, and he yells, "Mom, knock that off." That's a Catholic joke, Mary being sinless. But anyway, Jesus goes on now, after they all leave. And he says, he asks the question, "Woman, is there anyone here to condemn you?" And she says, "No one, sir." And he makes this interesting observation and statement. "Neither do I." Now, he didn't stop there, though. "Go and sin no more." So he is saying to the woman that, yes, you did something wrong here, but I also know a setup when I see one. Go and sin no more. I do not condemn you here. Caught in the act, but forgiven. He forces her accusers to set her free. Amazing story. But Jesus' forgiveness here does not eliminate consequences for our actions. A marriage can survive infidelity, but it takes a remarkable amount of mercy, patience, love, forgiveness, want to, and probably a good counselor to be able to do that. But it can and does happen. Exodus 34, verse 6, "God is rich in mercy and abounding in steadfast love." So as God is rich in mercy and forgiveness and love, so should we. Now, that is dealing with the whole question then and the whole deal of "thou shalt not commit adultery." It is not the unforgivable sin. Is it a sin with severe consequences? Yes. Can marriages survive? Yes. With difficulty, not without work. You cannot just assume that it's something that will go away. There are always going to be consequences for our actions. But God is rich in mercy and abounding in steadfast love, and he can forgive us, and we can forgive one another. Can trust be restored in a day? No. It takes time. But it can, and it does happen. So, that is the commandment, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." Now, next time, we're going to be getting into "do not steal." And that one will be interesting for us to get into. That will be Exodus chapter 20, verse 15. So as we make our way through our Lenten studies here now, as we're getting closer and closer to the Easter event, and I hope now that on this cold and snowy Monday that the Lord will bless you real good. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you. Have a great day.